Oxford Read and Discover, Level 6, Cells and Microbes, by Louise and Richard Spilsbury. Read by Laurel Lefkoe. Published and copyright Oxford University Press, 2010. Introduction. What are the smallest living things on Earth? The answer is cells. Some of the biggest living things, like whales, people, or trees, are made of millions of tiny cells. Microbes are living things that usually have just one cell. How do we know about cells? What types of cell do you know? How many cells are there in your body?
Discover!
Now read and discover more about amazing cells and microbes. Chapter 1. Discovering cells. Most cells are too small to see, so how do people know that living things are made of cells? No one knew about cells until microscopes were invented. Microscopes magnify tiny things like cells to make them look bigger so that people can see them. Learning about cells. In 1665, a British scientist called Robert Hooke made one of the first microscopes. He used it to look at a thin piece of tree bark called cork. He saw that the cork was made of lots of tiny pieces. These were the cork cells. Today, microscopes can magnify things 1,000,000 times.
Discover!
When Robert Hooke saw the pieces inside the cork, he called them cells because they looked like little rooms called cells. Living cells. If cells are so small, how do we know if they are living or not? We know a cell is living because it does what other living things do. A cell can get energy from its food, and a cell can move. A cell can grow so it can get bigger. A cell can reproduce. It can make more cells. Most living things are made of many cells. The simplest living things are made of just one cell. We call them microbes because we can only see them through a microscope. An amoeba is one of the biggest types of microbe, but it's so small that 50 amoebas together are only as big as 1 grain of rice. Many cells. Did you know that you started life as one cell? People, other animals, and plants grow from one cell into living things made of many cells. Different plants and animals are different sizes because of the number of cells in their body. An elephant is bigger than a rabbit because it has millions more cells. Types of cell. Not all cells are the same. Both plants and animals have different types of cell. For example, in plants, some cells make food and other cells take in water. The same cells that work together to do the same job are called tissues. For example, bark cells work together to make bark tissue on a tree. Skin cells make the skin tissue on an animal's body. Muscle cells make muscle tissues that help an animal to move. Some different tissues work together to make organs. Organs are important parts of the body, and they do amazing jobs. Eyes are organs that animals see with. Roots are organs that help plants to grow in soil. An elephant's trunk is an important organ. The elephant uses it to pull leaves from trees and to lift other plant foods and water to its mouth. The trunk is made of different tissues, like skin tissue and muscle tissue. Chapter 2. Animal cells. The cells in an animal's body are different shapes and sizes, but they have the same important parts inside. Do you know what's inside an animal cell? Inside animal cells. Animal cells have a cell membrane and a cytoplasm, and most cells also have a nucleus. The cell membrane is like a skin around the cytoplasm. It holds the cell together. It lets water and some other substances move through it to get in or out of the cell. It also stops other substances moving in or out. Many important chemical reactions happen inside the cytoplasm. In some of these reactions, chemicals join together to make new substances for the cell to use. In other reactions, substances break down into smaller chemicals. The cell nucleus. The nucleus controls what happens inside the cell. Inside the nucleus, there's a chemical code called DNA. The nucleus in every cell of an animal's body has the same code. This code controls how the cell grows, moves, and reproduces. It controls all the chemical reactions in the cell and the jobs that the cell does in the animal's body. The DNA code in the nucleus also controls what an animal looks like. DNA codes make one type of animal look different from another animal. For example, it creates the different types of fish that we see in the oceans. DNA codes also make all the people in the world look different from each other. Red blood cells. People and other animals have different types of cell to do different jobs. Cells are different shapes and sizes, and this helps them to do their different jobs. Red blood cells have a very important job to do. They take oxygen from the air to all the other cells in an animal's body. Animals need oxygen to live. Blood cells travel around an animal's body through blood vessels. Red blood cells are small, round, and flat. They look like tiny, soft cookies. Their shape helps them to move through thin blood vessels.
Discover!
1 drop of blood has up to 5 million red blood cells in it. How nerve cells work. There are nerve cells all around an animal's body. Nerve cells have long fibers to help nerves to send messages to each other. Do you know how your nerve cells work when you touch something that's too hot? First, nerves in your hand send a message up your arm to your spinal cord. Nerves in your spinal cord send a message to the muscles in your arm, telling them to move your hand away from the heat. These messages are very fast, and they are called reflexes. They help your body to stay safe.
Discover!
The nerve cells in a giraffe's neck are the longest cells in the world. One of these cells can be 3 meters long. Chapter 3. Plant cells. Like animal cells, plant cells have a cell membrane, a cytoplasm, and a nucleus. Plant cells also have other parts, a cell wall, a vacuole, and chloroplasts. The cell wall. Around the outside of the cell membrane of every plant cell, there's a cell wall. This is like a box around the cell. The cell wall is made of cellulose fibers. Cellulose fibers are very strong, and they help to give plant cells their shape. The strongest plant cell walls are in wood from trees.
Discover!
Some paper is made from cellulose. People put plant parts in water with special chemicals, and then they heat them to get the cellulose fibers out. Then they press the fibers together to make paper. What is a vacuole? The vacuole inside every plant cell is like a bag filled with water. The water gives the vacuole its shape, and it helps to give the plant cell its shape. Many plant cells inside a plant are like lots of tiny bags of water. Together, they press hard on the cell walls and help the plant to stand up. They make the plant stem stand up straight and they hold the leaves up into the light. On a hot day, water dries up, so there's less water for plants. When plant cells have less water, they do not stay the same shape. The plant cannot stand up anymore, and it wilts. Trees do not wilt because they have strong wood and bark to help them to stand up. How chloroplasts work. The chloroplasts in plant cells are very important. They give plant leaves and stems their green color, and they help the plant to make food. Like other living things, plants need food to live and grow. When the sun shines on a leaf, chloroplasts inside leaf cells catch and store energy from the sunlight. The plant cells use this energy to help them to make sugar. Sugar is a type of food for the plant. Before plant cells can make sugar, they have to collect water and carbon dioxide. Water comes from the soil. It travels up the roots and into the leaves of the plant through little tubes inside the plant's stem. Carbon dioxide is a gas that comes from the air. The leaf takes in carbon dioxide through tiny holes called stomata. When chloroplasts use the energy from sunlight to make sugar from carbon dioxide and water, it's called photosynthesis. The sugar moves from the leaves and through the stem to parts of the plant that need food.
Discover.
During photosynthesis, plant cells also make oxygen. Plants let oxygen out of their leaves through their stomata so that it goes into the air. People and other animals use this oxygen to live. Chapter 4. Microbes. There are many different types of microbe. Some live in water, in air, or in soil. Others live on or inside the body of other living things. Amoebas. An amoeba lives in wet places like ponds or soil, and it's so tiny that it's smaller than a grain of salt. An amoeba can make its body any shape. To feed, it moves around to find microbes that are smaller than it is. It catches these tiny microbes by making its body into a circle shape around them. Then the amoeba slowly digests them. Diatoms. Diatoms are microbes that live in water. Many live near the surface of the ocean. Like plant cells, diatoms have chloroplasts, and they can use sunlight to make their own food by photosynthesis. The diatom's cell wall is different from the cell walls inside a plant. It's made of a substance that looks like thin glass. Different types of diatom are different shapes, and some look beautiful through a microscope.
Discover.
During photosynthesis, diatoms and other ocean microbes make half of all the oxygen in the air. So these tiny living things are very important for all of us. Bacteria. Billions of years ago, bacteria were some of the first living things on Earth. Bacteria are microbes that live everywhere, and there are many different types. Some bacteria make us sick, and some are very useful. Bacteria can eat almost anything. Some feed on waste, some eat oil, and some eat the food between people's teeth. Bacteria are many different shapes. Some are like rods, some are like balls, and some are curly. Some have flagella that look like tiny hairs. These move in different directions to help the bacteria to move around.
Discover.
Some bacteria live in places like glaciers, high mountains, and volcanoes, where most other living things can't survive. Slime molds. Slime molds are types of microbe that usually live in gardens, on moldy leaves in woodlands, on wet soil, or on old trees. Like other microbes, every slime mold cell is tiny, but many slime mold cells join together into a group that travels to find food. This group of cells looks like a flat, messy pancake that can be yellow, orange, brown, or white. It moves very slowly across wood or soil to find bacteria, old leaves, or wood to eat. Then, like amoebas, the slime mold cells make themselves into a circle around their food before they eat it. Chapter 5. How cells work. Plants, animals, and microbes need energy to stay alive. The cells of all living things take this energy from food. Making energy. Mitochondria are tiny parts inside the cytoplasm of all cells, and they take energy from food. Cells that use a lot of energy, like the cells in muscle tissue and nerve tissue, have a lot of mitochondria. Inside the mitochondria, chemical reactions happen between oxygen and sugar. These reactions release energy from food. When living things use oxygen to release energy from food, it's called respiration.
Discover.
There's only very little oxygen in water at the bottom of the ocean. Microbes that live here can get energy from their food without oxygen. Using oxygen. Plant and animal cells use oxygen from the air for respiration. Plants take in oxygen for respiration through the stomata holes on their leaves. People and other animals take in oxygen by breathing it in through their mouth or nose. When animals move very fast, like when people run in a race or play a fast game of soccer, their muscle cells use a lot of energy. These cells need more energy from food so that they can keep working. So animals start to breathe faster to take in more oxygen for respiration. In and out. The cell membrane controls what goes in and out of every cell. It lets oxygen and sugar come into the cell for respiration. All chemical reactions make waste. During respiration, cells make waste carbon dioxide. The cell membrane lets carbon dioxide and other waste leave the cell. Plant root cells. Plant roots have a type of cell called a root hair cell. These cells are very long. They grow from the root into the soil. The cell membranes on root hair cells are very thin, so that water can go through them easily. Root hair cells collect most of the water that the plant needs and uses. How diffusion works. The cell membrane has little holes that let in substances that are useful to the cell. Most substances move into a cell by diffusion. This is when a substance moves from where there's more of that substance to another place where there's less of it. When there's more oxygen in an animal's blood than in its other cells, the oxygen moves from the blood into other cells. When there's more waste carbon dioxide inside a cell than outside it, the carbon dioxide moves out of the cell. Then it goes into the lungs, and animals breathe it out.
Discover.
The cell membrane works like the doors that only let people into a sports match if they have a ticket. It lets in substances that are useful to the cell. Chapter 6. dividing and reproducing. All living things grow old and die. That's why they need to reproduce to create more living things like themselves. Cells divide to grow, to repair something, and sometimes to reproduce. Dividing into two. Microbes, like amoebas and bacteria, reproduce by dividing into two. An amoeba breaks in half to create two new, smaller amoebas. These two new amoebas feed and grow, and then they are ready to divide in half and make more new amoebas. All the new amoebas are the same as the first one.
Discover.
Bacteria reproduce very quickly. One cell can divide every 20 minutes and become 5 billion cells in just 11 hours. Making new cells. The cells that make the tissues and organs of plants and animals divide too. They divide in half to create new cells that are the same as themselves, so that plants and animals can grow and get bigger. This is how the skin and muscles on a baby become bigger as the baby grows. This is also how plants become taller or grow new leaves. Plant and animal cells also make new cells to replace the ones that have become old or that have died. For example, skin cells divide to create new skin tissue to repair breaks in the skin when animals cut or hurt themselves. Sex cells. Microbes reproduce by dividing and creating other microbes that are the same as them. Most plants and animals reproduce differently from microbes. When people have a baby, the baby is not the same as its parents. This is because most plants and animals reproduce using sex cells. With people, a man makes sex cells called sperm, and a woman makes sex cells called eggs. When a sperm and an egg join together, they create a new cell. This new cell divides again and again to make many cells. These cells become different types of cell, like skin and muscle cells, to make different parts of a baby. Sharing DNA. Each sex cell has only half the amount of DNA that other cells have. When the two sex cells join, the new cell has a complete set of DNA. The new cell nucleus has DNA codes from both parents, half from the mother and half from the father. That's why a baby grows up into an adult who looks a little like both parents, but is also different from both of them.
Discover.
Identical twins are two babies born at almost the same time. They look identical because they share the same DNA from one egg and one sperm. Chapter 7. Cells and Infections. An infection is when microbes like bacteria or viruses make part of an animal's body sick. This is what happens when an ear infection gives you earache. Microbes reproduce quickly, so infections can make people and other animals sick very quickly too. Hunting bacteria. White blood cells are very important because they can kill bacteria. Bacteria travel into a person's body on the food that they eat, in the air that they breathe in, or through their broken skin. White blood cells can move out of the blood to hunt, catch, and eat bacteria in other tissues. Some white blood cells create substances that make the bacteria weaker so that it's easier for the other white blood cells to find and eat them. Antibiotics. Antibiotics are drugs that doctors give you to make you well when you are sick. Antibiotics only make you well if bacteria gave you the infection, like a throat infection that makes throats red and sore. Antibiotics work by killing bacteria or by stopping bacteria reproducing.
Discover.
In 1928, a British scientist called Alexander Fleming was studying bacteria when he saw that something was growing on them. It was a different microbe, and it had stopped the bacteria reproducing. He called this new antibiotic penicillin. Why is washing important? Dirt on your fingers has bacteria in it. When you touch your mouth, the bacteria get inside you and they can make you sick. A simple way to stop this is to wash your hands before you eat food. How viruses work. Viruses are another type of microbe that can make plants and animals sick. Viruses give people diseases like colds. They are much smaller than bacteria. Most viruses travel into an animal's body in the air that it breathes in. In the body, the virus moves inside a cell and starts to grow there. It makes more and more viruses, and then the cell breaks open. The other viruses get into more cells and make more viruses. Viruses move from person to person. If you have a cold and you sneeze, the viruses travel in the air and other people breathe them in. Finding viruses. Antibiotics cannot kill viruses, but white blood cells can kill them when they break out of a cell. White blood cells know that viruses are invaders because viruses have chemicals that are not usually inside the body. After a virus has been inside a body, the white blood cells remember it. The next time this virus gets inside the body, they can find it and kill it more quickly. Vaccinations. A vaccination is when doctors inject people with a small amount of a virus that would usually give them a serious infection. The virus is too weak to make people sick, but when it has been inside the body, the white blood cells remember it, so they are ready to kill it in the future. Chapter 8. Useful microbes. Do you know that there can be a kilogram of bacteria in a person's stomach? Don't be scared. Many microbes are very useful. They help people and Earth to stay well. Microbes inside us. After you eat, some of the bacteria in your stomach help your body to break down the food into sugar that your cells can use for energy. They also help you to get important substances like vitamins from the food, and they stop infections from bad bacteria that can give you stomachache. To help the useful bacteria in your stomach, you should eat more foods like fruit, vegetables, brown bread, and brown pasta. You shouldn't eat too many sweet and fatty foods like ice cream, chocolate, or French fries. Microbes and food. People use some microbes to make food. Yeasts are microbes that people use to make bread. When yeast is mixed with flour, salt, sugar, and water, it feeds on the sugar and makes carbon dioxide and other substances. The carbon dioxide makes the bread become bigger and lighter. When the bread is cooked, the other substances help to flavor it. Storing food. Some bacteria make lactic acid that stops food going bad so that we can store it for longer. People use lactic acid bacteria to make foods like soy sauce, sauerkraut, and kimchi. To make kimchi, salt is mixed with cabbage. Bacteria eat sugar from the cabbage and make lactic acid that stops the cabbage going bad. This gives kimchi its sour flavor. Microbes and fuel. A fuel is a substance that people use to make heat and to make machines work. People use bacteria to change waste into fuel. They put plant and animal waste inside a biodigester where bacteria feed on it. When they feed, the bacteria make a fuel called methane. The biodigester stores the methane so that people can use it for cooking food and heating water.
Discover.
If ships crash on rocks and drop oil in the ocean and on beaches, people sometimes put bacteria on the oil. The bacteria eat the oil and help to save the ocean animals. Soil microbes. There are bacteria in soil that help to break down plant and animal waste into tiny pieces. When they do this, they give back some of the nutrients from the waste into the soil. Plants use these nutrients to help them to grow. People make compost by collecting food waste and plant waste together. Bacteria in the waste help to break it down into compost. Farmers and gardeners mix the compost with soil to help plants to grow well. So without microbes like bacteria, there would be no life on Earth.